And I'm going to call this meeting of the Plan Commission to order. Could I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Betry?
Here.
Ms. Bindum?
Here.
Mr. Fell?
Here.
Mr. Fitch?
Here.
Mr. Hopkins?
Here.
Mr. Otto? Ms. Stake? And Mr. Trail?
Here. We do have a quorum. Are there any changes to the agenda?
No, sir.
The minutes. Anybody give me a motion? Moved by Mr. Trail.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Hopkins. Are there any changes to the minutes? No, hearing none. We'll have a voice vote. All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The minutes are approved. Any communications? We did have a slightly altered version of the bylaws because some of us received an incomplete set with the packet that didn't include, I guess, some of the pages. So now all the pages are in the copy that was left on our desks. Anything further?
That's it.
Continued public hearings. We've got Plan Case 2223 CP14, a request to adopt the Active Choices Champaign County Greenways and Trails Plan as an amendment to the 2005 Comprehensive Plan.
All right.
Mr. Engstrom.
So at our last meeting, the Plan Commission discussed this request and had some concerns about adopting the plan as part of the comprehensive plan because of a couple of reasons. One, inconsistencies among the maps in the Greenways and Trails Plan between that and our upcoming Bicycle Master Plan map. And also there was an inconsistency with the comprehensive plan mobility map. So Commission asked for staff to analyze those inconsistencies, and we produced a list of those for you in Exhibit D. So about 40 or so, 30 or 40 minor changes or minor differences between the plans. And we also looked at the comprehensive plan mobility map. We only found the one difference that Mr. Hopkins spotted on Olympian Drive. The Greenways and Trails Plan map has that going east of Route 45, whereas the comprehensive plan says it's an option to go east of there. Staff has also considered the language that will be most appropriate in adopting the Active Choices Plan. We discussed a few options at the last meeting. One is to adopt the Active Choices Plan as an amendment to the Comprehensive Plan with the exception of the specific changes, which we have now noted. Another is to adopt the Active Choices and amendment as an amendment of the Comprehensive Plan with general stipulation that any inconsistencies between the Active Choices Plan and other city plans shall not be adopted, and the city's existing and future plans shall prevail. Another option, accept the Active Choices Plan as an agency plan rather than to adopt it into the comprehensive plan, or possibly deny the acceptance of the plan. Staff is proposing that the Plan Commission forward the case to City Council with the recommendation to adopt the Active Choices Plan as an amendment to the comp plan with the general stipulation that any inconsistencies between the plan and the city plans shall not be adopted, and the city's existing and future plans shall prevail. And I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Engstrom. Any questions for Mr. Engstrom? None. Mr. Trail. A late question.
A couple of hopefully quick ones.
Okay.
Can you give me just what does meaning adopting as an agency plan?
Well, so the language would just be to accept it rather than adopt it into the comprehensive plan.
In other words, it's just recognizing its existence.
Yes.
Second, hopefully, also, you're going to have a quick yes and tell me exactly where someone would do that. It's great to have this system of plans. Where would a concerned member of the public go to get a concise description of what the relationship of all these plans are and how they would interpret it if they were interested in knowing what it said about their neighborhood or anything?
Well, we don't have a concise list of all the plans. We've accepted some as agency plans and adopted some into the comprehensive plan, and those have been adopted as ordinances. So right now there's not a good place to go for that, but that's something we could work on.
Because I think a lot of our concerns would be alleviated that were expressed the last time would be alleviated if there was a quick and easy way to go and see here are the relevant plans if I'm interested in bikeways, and here what they are and what Urbana thinks about them. They're we know they're there, but we're not going to follow them. So if I'm a concerned member of the public, I know where. If I'm looking at one, what its real status is.
Mm-hmm. Yep, we do have a list of adopted city plans. They're pretty easy to find on our website. But the external agency plans like this and the long-range transportation plan, while we're doing the process while those plans are being created, we do put up links to all that those input opportunities. But after that, they kind of get lost in the shuffle.
Thank you, Mr. Engstrom. Any further questions? All right, thanks. Do we have any commentary or questions, discussion? Mr. Hopkins?
So I move that we send Plan Case 2223 CP 14 to City Council with a recommendation for approval based on option B, the recommended option. And I would make a couple of comments sort of reinforcing Mr. Trails.
Could we see if we can get a second?
Oh, okay.
Do we have a second? Oh, I'm sorry. Mr.
Mr.
Buttrey,
we-
seconded.
We know we need to create on the website a way of accessing at least this information.
Agreed.
And I think my understanding is that if we ever get staffed up, this would be one of the priorities. So I think in the current circumstances, option B is the right thing to do. I think we should change those circumstances so we have a better way of doing this. I think we know roughly how to do that. It just takes time.
Any further discussion? I think we're ready for a roll call.
Ms. Bindum?
Yes.
Mr. Fell?
Yes.
Mr. Fitch?
Yes.
Mr. Hopkins?
Yes.
Ms. Stake?
Yes.
Mr. Trail?
Yes.
And Mr. Betry?
Yes.
That motion passes. And has the city council been waiting for us?
Yes, that'll go back to City Council on November 17th.
Great, thank you. We don't have any old business. We have a new public hearing. Plan Case 2244T14, a request by the zoning administrator to amend Article 9 of the Urbana zoning ordinance to allow electronic message board displays on signs in the CRE Conservation, Recreation, Education Zoning District. And we have a new face, so if you introduce yourself to the Plan Commission. How do you spell your last name? Matt, oh, I see, it's right here. Great.
Gotcha. So, this case concerns a text amendment to the zoning ordinance that would allow electronic message display boards in the CRE district. Currently, the zoning ordinance only allows those message display boards in the B3 general business district, but the text amendment would allow them also in the CRE district, subject to very similar restrictions to what they currently face right now in the B3 district. And electronic displays are often used by many of the same uses that are found in the CRE district, and they're also currently in place at the Urbana High School and Urbana Middle School. The amendment would allow uses within the CRE district to have the same privileges, or many of the same privileges, with regards to electronic displays as the uses in the B3 district, and also put them more on par with many of the peer organizations in other communities. So many of those institutions that are allowed in the CRE district, they're more of a community-focused, or have a community-focused orientation and appeal to broad segments of the population. And at the same time, electronic displays are an accepted and effective means of transmitting messages, and they also have a number of advantages over traditional displays, notably that they can be changed a lot more quickly and a lot more easily, and in doing so can help to spread messages of community importance, if need be, as soon as possible. They also offer much greater visibility, especially at night and during winter when when it's not as light out during peak travel times, when cars are going along arterial roads. So in terms of the actual restrictions that are in place on electronic displays in the B3 district, they're restricted in terms of area, such that they can't exceed, the electronic display itself cannot exceed 50% of the total sign area. Animation is prohibited, and the display change frequency on the sign cannot change more than once every 3 minutes. The signs also must be in conformance with the other restrictions in the zoning ordinance, and illumination is also kept in check as well through automatic dimming technology, and is kept to a minimum of 0.3 foot candles above ambient light levels. So the electronic displays that are in place at Urbana High School and at the middle school were permitted under the authority of the state architects. They did not actually receive city building permits, but they are currently under the city zoning ordinance in terms of if they did any site improvements, and the proposed text amendment would bring those signs under conformance of the zoning ordinance, and they would need to be in compliance with the zoning ordinance in that regard. And it's also important to note that no complaints or ill effects of those existing signs within the CRE district at the two schools have been noted to the best of our knowledge. And in many other communities, park districts are often frequent users of electronic displays. And with that in mind, the Urbana Park District is proposing an electronic display at the Phillips Recreation Center. And that electronic display would replace the existing manual message board that currently exists. And the proposed design is in conformance with the text amendment and the proposed regulations for the electronic display boards. Allowing electronic display boards in the CRE district would also allow their use by private entities and nonprofits. And most of those private and nonprofit users that would be allowed in the CRE district would require a conditional use permit or a special use permit, and whichever review board governs the special use permit or the conditional use permit would also have a certain degree of leverage in terms of adding limitations or prohibiting electronic signs if it's found that those would overly affect community character or neighborhood character. Some of those private or nonprofit uses would include camping areas, bait shops, places of worship, but also places like driving ranges or mini golf courses. There's also a variety of different uses that are permitted by right, and those are mostly agricultural, educational, municipal government type buildings or recreation facilities. The current regulations as they exist try to minimize the restrictions, try to minimize the effect of the signs while still allowing electronic displays in the B3 districts. And with that in mind, applying many of those same regulations to the CRE district would give the uses there the same ability to transmit messages in a more effective manner while also keeping true to the city's commitment to not permitting too many signs or adding to visual clutter. So many of the restrictions for the CRE district are currently on the books in the zoning ordinance, such that the electronic displays would be at most half of the total sign area. And with regards to freestanding signs in the CRE district, they would electronic displays reflecting the maximum allowable size of the signs would only be 16 square feet in size or 25 square feet in size if in the case of a monument sign or where two frontages are combined. And for wall signs in the CRE district, the total size of electronic displays would not be larger than 4% of the wall area, reflecting that 8% of the wall area is the maximum size for wall signs in CRE district, and differing from the restrictions that are in place for the B3 district, the maximum square footage for an electronic display on a wall sign in the CRE district would be 50 square feet. In general, the text amendment would permit the electronic display boards while minimizing their impact and also helping to put many of the CRE uses on par with where they are in some of the other communities and keeping true to the community's commitment to reducing visual clutter. The text amendment itself is in section 9, or would be in section 9.4 under part C with regards to electronic displays. And the first change would put in CRE district next to the B3 district, such that freestanding and wall signs in either of those two districts would be allowed to have electronic displays in conformance with the rest of the requirements, which concern area. The electronic display board would not be allowed to be larger than half of the total sign area. And also the other change that would be reflected in the text amendment would be that the electronic displays on wall signs would not be larger than 50 square feet. And half of the area of a wall sign in the CRE district would ordinarily be 150 feet, but that's taken down in this text amendment. The regulations for animation and illumination would remain the same. In summary, the proposed amendment would enhance the restrictions on electronic displays by allowing them in the CRE district as well as the B3 district. And it would also further advance the purposes of the zoning ordinance. And it would, again, help to reduce the spread of signage and the spreading of visual clutter. The proposed amendment would help to serve the needs of institutions that support a broad range of the population of Urbana, and it is in conformance with the State Zoning Act. The proposed amendment would also assist in the administration of the zoning ordinance, and it would bring into conformance with the zoning ordinance the existing signs at Urbana High School and Urbana Middle School. The Plan Commission has options to recommend approval of the text amendment as is, recommend approval as modified by specific changes, or recommend denial. And based on the evidence and without hearing any additional evidence from the public hearing, staff recommends approval of the text amendment. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Reggie? Oh, okay. Mr. Fell.
Was there a specific request for this change to the zoning ordinance? Was this instigated by somebody's action, or?
It was instigated by the Park District requesting to put an electronic sign on their sign at the Phillips Center.
Okay.
And, yeah.
And a follow-up, it looks like the biggest electronic sign anybody would be allowed to put up would be 300 square feet?
No, that is the, that's the largest total area of a wall sign in a CRE district.
Okay, so, well, I guess in the text amendment, we have where the measurement distance is to find out what the foot candle is, and which indicates somebody could put in an electronic sign at 650 square feet. Could that happen?
Well, for signs in the B3 district, they could be actually up to 500 square feet, I believe. But they'd have to be set back pretty far.
Okay.
In the CRE district, Mr. Moore, in the text amendment. Thanks. In the text amendment, it was saying that they can't have a wall sign that's larger than 50 square feet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the actual display, the wall sign itself could be, has a maximum area of 300 feet, but the display board itself would be at a maximum of 50 feet.
Okay.
Ms. Stig, did you have a question?
Well, I wonder about the private signs.
I just wanted to emphasize that just to show that it wouldn't only be park districts or municipal buildings that would be able to use these electronic billboards. It could also be uses like a bait shop outside of a park somewhere that has a lake. It could be a miniature golf course that's within the CRE district.
Well, could it be ads for what they want?
It could be. They could.
It could be.
Well,
Mr. Engstrom?
I just want to bring up, looking at our zoning map, the property owners in the CRE district are mostly the university. There's the school district and the park district, and the sanitary district owns a property zone CRE. But other than that, there's one small strip just north of I-74 is the only privately owned land in the CRE district. So it's not a very common district outside of those institutional uses.
Can I say something more?
Sure.
I just don't see why we would want to do that with private people and everything, so that they can just get their ads in there or anything. I think we've got too much junk around anyhow.
Yeah, we could take that on a discussion if you want to further.
A minor
Mistake.
clarification. So for electronic message boards, these are only allowed on the on-premise on-premise signs. And they're really only intended to be to display messages for events or things pertinent to the property they're on. So usually in the B3 district, it might be on a gas station, and it would say what the prices are for the gas or if they have specials. But it's not intended for off-premise advertisements in any way.
Does the text amendment say that?
No, it does not.
Okay.
Yeah, I will take this on in discussion, but I think you start to regulate the content of these things and you start to get in trouble because of free speech. Mr. Betry.
I see that the restrictions say no animation, but the examples given, the Urbana High School, that sign changes about every 5 to 10 seconds. The middle school, about 3 seconds, including animated borders and pictures of their mascots or whatever. And while I feel like the idea of decreasing clutter, I feel like that goes contrary to the idea of decreasing visual clutter as was expressed. And I think that something that, with the animation, that maybe not is permitted but is apparent, that doesn't really fit in with the compatibility of the surroundings, in my opinion.
With respect to the signs at the school properties, those have been non-conforming since they were installed. And we really haven't had a mechanism to enforce against those nonconformities. The only thing we could have done is ask them to remove them entirely, since there's no way to allow them in CRE. But since this amendment has been proposed, we have been in contact with the school district, and we're working with them to bring them into compliance. And adopting this amendment will give us the means to do that.
Yeah, and as background, Mr. Buttrey, we just passed this digital sign ordinance, 3-4 years ago? And for that, they weren't allowed at all. At the park district, I mean, the school district was essentially beyond our jurisdiction until we passed this ordinance. Any further questions for staff? Mr. Trail?
Are there any other ways that the school signs are non-conforming? I guess my answer is, I don't have any way of judging your foot candle, sign, how bright those would really be. So, for instance, what is the current, if you measured the current school signs, are they conforming to the brightness portion of this? And if so, by how much?
We haven't measured them yet, again, because we haven't had a mechanism to bring them into conformance. But we do have those light meters, so we will be working with the school district to bring them into conformance.
Do you have an example of an existing sign in B3 that would be on the edge of the brightest sign that would be allowed?
The Wendy's sign appears to be kind of bright, and we actually haven't measured that one yet. So I'm not actually sure if that's in compliance or not right now. But that seems to be a bright one.
Any further questions? Thank you, Mr. Reddick. Mr. Engstrom. We'll proceed with discussion. Bernadine?
Well, I just wondered how.
Oh, I'm
how
sorry.
much-
I can't do that yet,
Okay,
Bernadine.
okay.
Thanks, Mr. Hopkins. Mr. Hopkins is correct. We have to have a hearing. Therefore, does anybody care to speak to the Plan Commission on this particular case? No? Thank you. Then we'll proceed now with discussion. So, I'm sorry. Ms. Day.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
Got ahead of myself.
yeah, that's right. Well, I just don't know what all's going to be put up.
That's right. That's right.
And that, it sounds like you can do anything, to me. It doesn't sound there are any restrictions or anything that tells you that you can't do.
I think your interpretation is correct as to content, by and large, provided it meets other applicable laws and regulations. There's no reason that bait shop couldn't advertise,
Yeah, right.
or in that
Right,
example.
Right, and it gets really bad when you have too many and then people don't see the ones that are important. if you have a bunch of signs up.
True. Ms. Bynum?
To me, well, at least from my understanding, it seems that the majority of the places in this district are, like Mr. Ingstrom said, like with the university and the school districts and the park district. So there aren't a lot of private buildings that would be advertising. So I don't think there would be like a flood of advertising that's not related, you know, to the school or park district events and those types of things. And he said that the advertising for that small strip that is privately owned would have to be on the business, so I don't think they could just pop up signs, you know, any other place in the district other than on their own property.
I think that it's possible that the university of those might be the most likely to advertise. Mr. Trail, or Ms. Bynum, do you have anything else?
No.
Okay.
I have a couple comments.
Oh, yeah, Mr. Trail had his hand up.
Is there any reason to believe that we would get any great proliferation of additional signs simply because we allow them to, the only thing that springs to mind is when I was much younger, I lived next to a church who actually, this is long before electronic signs, had a very similar difference of opinion with a municipality on signage, and they eventually ended up erecting about 40 signs, all of them individually conforming. So I guess that's sort of I have a feeling that most of these electronic signs will simply replace currently non-electronic forms of communication, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, they're not beating down the doors to put up electronic signs on these other uses. It was just brought about really by the Park District asking if they could put one up even, and that kind of opened the door to us to request this amendment, and we realized that the school had those two signs, so it would be a good opportunity to bring those into conformance. But other than the Park District, there's no other pending sign that we're aware of. Sorry.
Mr. Bell?
Yeah, I have a couple comments. I think, first of all, that at some point we felt strong enough about some of our land to say it was conservation land, and now to say we're going to go put an electronic sign there seems kind of counterproductive to me, even if it's a small percentage of the land. And what prevents anyone, apparently the one private landowner in the CRE district, from applying to put signs up if there's no regulations that say they have to be about the business on the property? I mean, if he came in, how could you deny that landowner a sign? And you have no grounds to deny it, I guess, is my fear. Even though you need a conditional use permit or special use permit, I don't think that offsets the risk to me.
With respect to the on-premise versus off-premise, these are the content. It's difficult with content neutrality. These are only allowed on the on-premise signs, so they're not supposed to have the advertisements for off-premise businesses. So I think if someone were to try that, that would be something we would challenge legally. I'm not sure how that challenge would go, but
I mean, just to be the devil's advocate, where's the Park District want to put a sign?
at the rec center right along Springfield.
Okay, can they advertise pool passes?
Yes,
It's not on premises.
right, but it's related.
Yeah, so to use the bait shop example and continue on with that, you could, advertise for Zebco, because you're in the fishing business, or any line of thing related to your business, I think maybe. I mean, I think it's possible.
I think we're implying regulations that are impossible to uphold.
Mr. Trail?
Is it the electronic part of this? Is there any, the only they could put up non-electronic signs that would have the same problems currently, correct?
Correct.
The only thing that's changing is the electronic part. Now, and maybe the current signage law isn't very good either. But I'm not reading into this that this is, you're creating a new category of where to put a sign where you couldn't put a sign before. You're just now saying you can, under certain limited circumstances, make, I guess, some portion of them, maybe if it's a large sign already, electronic. Is that, I mean, am I misreading that?
No, that's correct.
Ms. Bynum?
So, like, would it be possible to make an amendment, another text amendment, saying that they can have a certain number of signs? Like in your case where that church had like 40 different signs, to prevent something like that, you know, from happening?
We actually do have limits on the number of signs. So for freestanding signs, properties are only allowed one freestanding sign per business frontage. So a property on a corner would have the ability to do 2 signs. Most businesses can only do 1. The other area where electronic signs could be are on wall signs, which are limited by area. So it's limited to 10% of the area of the wall. So if you have a very long wall, you could do several signs, but you would run up to the absolute area limits, which would be 50 square feet in this case.
Mr. Petrie?
If we're already requiring the installation of an electronic display to require a conditional use permit, then is this an extra step to change the zoning of the district at all? Am I misunderstanding?
No, the conditional use permit part is only for certain uses that were listed in the memo. So electronic signs are allowed by right with building permit approval in most B3 uses. So they would be allowed by right in the B3 or in the CRE uses listed here.
Further discussion or questions? Mr. Hopkins?
I guess I think we're maybe a little too concerned. Most of the issues of concern are going to occur in the B3, where we're not actually discussing the B3. The B3 already has less restrictive sizes than this proposed text amendment. And I see a benefit in Phillips Recreation Center being able to provide more information than it can now by going out and putting up by hand letters of physical fonts. If we're letting businesses do this and we're not letting our public entities do it, it just seems inappropriate to me.
Anything further? Responses to Mr. Hopkins?
I'd just like to
Mr. Pell?
reiterate the point I feel strongest about is, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to have electronic signs in the R or E district,
Yeah,
but
it's
it
the
is in the
mixed-
C
It's
district,
the
in
mixed
my
part.
opinion.
Yeah.
Because we designated that land conservation land for a reason. And even whether it's privately or publicly owned, it doesn't seem that by right they should be able to put an electronic sign there to me.
Mr. Trail? Yeah, I'm sorry, I talked over you, I didn't mean to.
Can you currently put a non-electronic sign on conservation land?
Yes.
Yes.
What are the situations that you would see that?
A non-electronic sign? Just like at the Phillips Rec Center or, you know, at the pool. I can't think of any other specific examples off the top of my head, but those are two I can think of.
Perhaps so. In the case of the city, or I'm trying to think of in the case of a land use that's actually conservation, I guess maybe the university has a forest where they would put up a sign announcing what the forest is. That's the only thing I can think of that would be in a conservation use.
Mr. Hopkins?
Yeah, I think there's one zoning category, CRE.
Mhm.
The city is not actually dividing uses into conservation, recreation, or education. It's listing uses in a category called CRE. So at the moment anyway, we don't have a way of distinguishing or making that classification. And I think that the university does not subject itself, one can argue about whether it is
It's
subject
supposed
to
to, yeah.
city rule, but it does not subject itself to city ordinance. And I don't think there is anything else in the CRE in the city. And actually, I don't think any of the university forests are in the city, maybe.
Arboretum. The Arboretum.
Well, the
That's kind of
Arboretum,
a
yeah,
function,
but, you know, whether that's conservation or recreation,
It's open.
it's all artificial and exotic for the most part anyway, so calling it conservation is a bit bizarre to me.
Somewhat. Quasi.
So I think the actual effect of this is the recreation facilities of the park district and the school district. And it seems to me it's okay.
Anything further? Does anybody feel strong enough to move it? Ms. Bynum?
Wanted to try.
Good.
So I move that we send plan case 2244 T14 to the Urbana City Council with a recommendation for approval.
Second?
Moved by Ms. Bynum, seconded by Mr. Hopkins. If there's no further discussion, if I could have a roll call when you're ready.
Mr. Fell,
No.
Mr. Fitch,
Yes.
Mr. Hopkins,
Yes.
Ms. Stake,
No.
Mr. Trail, Mr. Petrie, Ms. Bynum,
Yes.
That motion passes. I don't know how many of us there are, 4-2 or 5-2? 5-2. So, and that'll go to the council, I presume, at the same time as the last one?
November 17th.
Great, thank you very much. Now, continuing on with new business, we have an update to the Plan Commission's bylaws. This was a case that originally came up a year or so ago and was put to the side as city staff had some turnover, and now we're back to it. So, Mr. Ingstrom.
Yes. Just, you mentioned at the top of the meeting, we did hand out the corrected copy. For those of you who get paper packets, the original packet had just the odd numbered pages. So the proposed amendments are on page number 4 and 5 under Article 5, Order of Business. And these proposed amendments are actually not related to what the Plan Commission has previously seen. These are new amendments which were brought up by the city attorney after some administrative rulings about the Open Meetings Act. They've asked us to make sure all our commissions have language that's more specific regarding public input. So the specific items are regarding limiting the time of public input. That time can be shortened if the commission so chooses. The public input may be limited to topics germane to those described on the agenda, again, if the commission chooses. And also, no member of the commission should be obligated to respond to any public input provided. So those are the changes suggested by the City Legal Division.
Great. Any questions for Mr. Engstrom? Mr. Hopkins?
The authority to reduce the time limit to 3 minutes or shorter, is that a meeting time decision or a permanent decision?
That's a meeting time decision. It's
Okay.
meant to allow for cases where there's lots and lots of public input.
Okay, that's what I assumed, but it doesn't quite say that, so.
Mr. Trail?
On topics germane, that's kind of nebulous. Who makes the determination? And is it, I'm going to assume the intent is the chairperson would make the unilateral determination that a topic is not germane to the current agenda, or how's that going to work?
Well, you could write that in your amendment. You could say it's up to the chair, or you could give the members of the board the ability to vote on it, or to object to the chair limiting input.
I'm assuming this would only be invoked in some contentious setting, so I would assume we would want something in there that says, here are exactly the mechanics, and
Anything further? I tend to agree with Mr. Trail on that. I think we should tighten up that language to make it clear that it's going to be the chair. You know, turn it into active voice instead of passive voice, instead of maybe, say the chair. Right, exactly. And as with other rulings of the chair, they can be overridden by a majority vote with following a motion by the plan commissioners. So if the chair were to do anything unilateral and outrageous, you could check me.
I would agree with that.
Okay? So yeah, just turn that, the chair may limit instead of all public input may be limited. So it would say the chair may limit public input to topics germane. Does that seem reasonable language?
Yeah,
Mr. Hopkins?
You might be able to use the same language you used for the 5-minute rule.
Yeah, that'd be fine too.
Because that gets in the, without debate by motion. It makes clear that we have
It makes
to
it more
be-
clear, it does, yeah.
What the mechanism would be.
Mr. Trail?
you could almost combine them. I mean, they're really sort of dealing with the same sort of control of public input, and, you know, basically the chairperson shall have the authority to reduce the time limit or to a shorter time agreement, or to limit public input to topics germane to.
That's another way to go. Yeah, that would be probably the most efficient way. Mistake? I'm
Well,
sorry. Mr. Hopkins.
did you find that you have too many of our people to come and who want to come and talk about some particular
Yeah, typically
thing?
we don't, you know, sometimes we do. You've been here a while, and, you know, city
So-
council, it happens more often.
Well, it seems like you're 3 minutes you're giving somebody?
Fine.
Right now, the bylaws allow 5.
Yes.
And this is saying that, maybe we make that more specific too, and say, in cases where with overwhelming public requests for input,
Mm-hmm.
that wouldn't hurt.
Because I think we are interested in what people are saying, what
Oh,
they
absolutely.
want. And so we have to have some time for them to speak.
Now, this is pertaining only to Actually, this is only pertaining to audience participation. So this is not pertaining to testimony in a case or on an item on the agenda. This is just in the open-ended public audience participation session that is at the end of our, so at the end. So it says, any person addressing the Plan Commission during audience participation shall be allowed 5 minutes, and then it goes on with the rest of this. And it's saying that if somebody, and generally, our rule is that pretty much anything goes in audience participation. It doesn't have to be germane right now, and oftentimes won't be germane. It's just a concern that a citizen has. I have a little, sometimes I've said that, at least, and I think Mr. Pollack too, if I remember correctly, if something's clearly out of our jurisdiction, I've said that, such as, it's not related to zoning or planning, or land use, or, anything like that, then I've said, that's a matter for the city council, and, talk to them about it, because there's nothing we can do about it. So maybe even on the agenda, might even be a little too specific to get to that point. Mr. Trail?
You might, if you're concerned about an overly broad interpretation of it, future tyrannical chair people, persons might
could
actually
happen.
begin this little thing with, in the interests of ensuring in, limited time that the maximum number of people can give public input. The
Yeah.
chair can, and that kind of,
That puts it in context. I like that, yeah. That's good. That's a much better way than I think I tried to say it, so. Ms. Bynum?
I just had a question about this in section. It says where, the extension shall be decided without debate by a motion approved by the majority vote of the members of the commission present. So how does that take place? So if someone goes over their 5-minute timeline, we just vote that they can continue?
No, I would stop them, and if you wanted to, if you wanted them to continue, someone would make a motion to let the speaker continue. And if it was seconded, then I would ask for does it say roll call? It just says majority vote, so I probably just would ask for a voice vote.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Trail?
having, not actually acting as chairperson or even a member, but having been at meetings.
Believe me, I'm acting as chairperson.
In larger jurisdictions where sometimes very contentious issues with large number of people, there's a pretty good value, even though you don't think you're ever going to use it. If you ever do get in a situation where things have gotten, you feel like it's nice to have nice black and white, I was at one where they literally said, okay, the chairman got up and said, okay. And they were ready. I guess they had known there was going to be a big brouhaha at the meeting, and they literally
Put the clock? Yeah.
They didn't put the clock, they had a placard up with the rules
Okay.
and how they were going to deal with it.
Sure.
When a vote came and motion and the whole bit. And they literally took time and stopped and said, this is how the rules are, now we're going to go. And it really seemed to placate the audience. Many people who were thinking, oh, I'm not going to get to speak or, whatever.
Yeah.
We don't have, I don't think, fixed ending times. The only other addition that you might have for this kind of thing, not that I'm hoping we ever get in that kind of situation, is rules to do with when you cut off the meeting and whether you can end a meeting and not continue if you have additional public input you haven't heard, things like that.
Right, and again, this part we're talking about now is just audience participation. So in regard to a public hearing, I have been reading the rules for a public hearing before every public hearing. That's brought by a petitioner, so it's clear that when the petitioner, what are the rights and the expectations of for the petitioner and others. And we've given a broad latitude for that, and I think that's consistent with the bylaws.
No, I'm really talking more just the public participation.
Right.
If you had 100 people show up and wanted
To force
have
some-
their
yeah.
say, the one situation where I'm really into that, putting the stuff up, saying there are clear rules, we already know, we're already cognizant of this, here's the rules. If you hang around, you're gonna get your chance. That seemed to really.
Not a bad idea to have in addition to my verbal going through them, to have a written notice. That would be more, I think, a best practice than something.
I'm
Yeah,
just saying,
right.
if you have it codified, then the rules are clear, you're not making it up as you go.
Lay it out, yeah.
You can't accuse you of bias.
Right, right. I agree with you. Does anybody else have anything on that particular point that we're talking? Item, what is this? Item B5, which is 5.5. Oh, 6, yeah, 5.5. When this came up before, I had questioned, I was not chair then, but I had questioned Article 6.6. And this is the issue of opponents cross-examining the petitioner. And it implies that, to me, it implies that the cross-examination, I've interpreted that to say, ask me the question and I'll pass it on. I would like to make that more specific. To say that, and again, this is just if it starts to get contentious, and we have had cases where somebody turns around and, begins to question the petitioner. Why do you want to do this? Well, you want to ruin my neighborhood, that, whatever the case may be. And I would just rather have those come to the chair with the expectation that then the chair will ask those back, and I think those could be either written, submitted beforehand, or they could come up orally just the normal course of testimony. I don't know what everybody thinks about that. It's just a way to keep the meetings from, keep them sort of under control.
I would agree with that.
Ms. Bynum? Mr. Trail?
I suggest that in this kind of format, that the petitioners shouldn't be placed under any, that they have to respond to anyone but the commission. I mean, they're here petitioning the commission.
I think that's kind of what I'm driving at here.
Yeah, I would remove the word cross-examination completely from this.
And in fact, I had a specific, and so what I had done was stricken after the word opponents, the third occurrence of the word opponents, where it says opponents shall be allowed a reasonable opportunity for relevant questioning. I had changed it to opponents may ask, striking shall be allowed reasonable opportunity for, and then relevant questions, striking ing, striking i.e. cross-examination of the petitioner. And then I added, I don't know how fast you can write, Jeff, by submitting questions to the Plan Commission, either in writing or during oral testimony. And then I added a whole new sentence right after that. The chairperson will direct the petitioner to answer such questions during rebuttal. To make sure that, and then it says, then I left the rest where it says if the person can't or won't, then the chairs to direct the secretary to take note. Basically, they couldn't or wouldn't answer the question.
A little on Illinois law, but are they actually under any legal compulsion to respond to any question that we ask?
I don't know.
It's in their interest, certainly.
Sure. I don't know about that. I mean, I think it would come down to us having a full record and making sure that the basis for our decision-making is fully specified in case of a lawsuit. So, and Mr. Feld might have a better idea of this than me. I mean, I don't think they have to answer anything.
I don't think they do either.
But it might open the city up to a potential lawsuit. They didn't get the whole record. They didn't let me speak. Or they didn't make him answer my questions, therefore, the record isn't complete.
Do we run any risk of if an opponent asks a question and you're the one that gets to decide if it's a relevant question or not, and the opponent thinks it's relevant and you don't ask it? I mean, do we? I certainly don't think we want to say we have to answer every question they have, because.
Well, in that case, the petitioner could say, I don't think that's relevant. And
Well, I'm
it
just
would be noted.
trying to, I don't want to say save time, but streamline the process of who gets to decide if it's relevant. Can you just ignore their question? Or do we have to ask everyone that any opponent wants to have the answer to?
I think at best we want to say they're petitioning us to ask certain questions. I mean, I don't think we want to put ourselves with the obligation
could
that
say
we
that-
have to ask
we could
every
say the chair
question
may.
that an opponent.
We could say the chair may, that last sentence there that I had added, instead of the chairperson will direct the petitioner, the chairperson may direct, which gives the chair latitude, and which could be overridden by the membership. No, I want to hear the answer to that question. That would leave discretion with the commission, essentially.
So that's number 16 on page 6.
Number 6.
16.
What's on 16? Oh, it's already covered?
Well, yes and no.
Oh, yeah.
Admissibility is not the same thing as relevance.
No.
One of my reactions to this procedure for hearings is it doesn't look at all familiar. And what I mean by that is it doesn't sound like what we do at all to me.
Actually, it is. Since I've been reading this thing that I guess the city decided that I needed to read. And so the chair opens the public hearing.
Yeah.
Staff presents a summary. Petitioner outlines the request.
Prior to introducing evidence. We don't.
And presents evidence.
No, well, it says prior to introducing, the petitioner shall present evidence. We don't really use.
Evidence is kind of a strong word for what we do.
Yeah, we don't focus on the idea of evidence. And the petitioner may rebut but not introduce new evidence in point 9. So we're saying
That's like
if there's something that they disagree with, they can argue against it, but they can't add some new information that makes the point.
Yeah,
It just, I don't know how much of this is based on the legal requirements for our procedures. My guess is that's where it came from. But I can imagine a slightly looser way of framing some of this that would be more informative to people of what actually goes on.
Yeah, evidence is, testimony is probably better.
And then in 13, it says the commission shall not be bound by strict rules of evidence. Well, strict rules of evidence is a legal thing. And I understand we're a quasi-judicial body, we're not a legislative body, there's trickiness here.
There are different rules of evidence too. Civil procedure, criminal
Yeah, we
procedure,
don't-
different
And-
rules of
and-
it, so.
May require advance registration of opponents. I don't know if we've ever done
No.
that.
Well, that would just be fill out a slip. I mean, like the city council does. I mean,
Well,
yeah,
maybe.
it would be anybody.
If petitioners and opponents should present all evidence they possess concerning the request at the initial phase of the public hearing. It just,
A couple of
Mr. Trail.
things, before we start designing a new legal system all our own. Are these rules similar to what other commissions and boards use? Is there statewide, I was following administrative law, I would say, and I don't know whether there are model rules of administrative procedure that the state has, or, I mean, obviously, nothing's come along that's caused too much trouble, with the way it's been operating before. It seems to me, this is what you have been living under. I mean, when were these adopted?
2005 is what the stricken date at the front says.
And I'm getting the impression that they're at best loosely the description of what goes on, and probably not the letter of what currently happens.
Well, yeah, I mean, I read through this list, which really does go point by point, but it doesn't get into some of the subtleties.
Well, some of the terms that are
Yeah,
used,
right,
I
and that.
think, is what's giving it, as an order of procedure,
It's fine.
fine.
yeah.
But some of the evidence and rebuttal and, things like that make it sound maybe a little more formalized than it actually is. But I guess the gist of my question is, are there real legal, there must be somewhere in the state or, someone's ordinance that says if you're going to have an administrative hearing of this, that there are, certain things you have to follow. So does anyone know what those are?
I would guess that you're correct, and I do not know what those are. We could check with the legal division if you guys would like more specific direction on the rules that you have to follow.
Why did the legal division pick this specific one? They had some specific issue, or?
I think it was a relatively recent administrative ruling.
Concerning someone else, and they were
Yeah.
watching the literature
Yes.
and said, well, we should take cognizance of that and do something.
Correct.
I'd be very interested, I would think that the city would have an interest in having one process for all similar boards that conduct hearings, so that any citizen petitioners that come before it would know there's one set of rules and this is how it works. And-
Yeah, I think I probably should stop us here for a minute and see if the audience, if we don't have any further questions of staff, and we can come back to discussion. So I'll invite any members of the audience who want to address the Plan Commission concerning the bylaws at this time.
Well, seems like it's riddled with all kinds of complexity. This is
If you could state your name, Ms. McCusick, please, for the
sort of
record.
like you're saying, giving this an unlimited time, because even though it's under new business, that not as a case, you're going to have it, you're hearing it like a case. And
I'm not going to hold you to, I'm not going to cut you off after 5 minutes. But I will ask you to, be germane.
Okay, I think that you need the two, we're under the current bylaws, so you'd need to follow the procedure for the amendment of the bylaws to effect any change to them at minimum, and so that's on page, I'd rather go with my own copy, because,
Okay.
and then, it wasn't clear when you talked about it in communications. You said that people got something strange in their paper packets, but what's been up at the web that what's been web posted for 48 hours has been correct. The people at home can know that they were
Yes,
looking at the
ma'am.
right thing.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, no, that was just in the mailing to the commissioners. So the ones who received paper packets, there was a copying error.
I'm not sure that I want to be interrupted, but even though I'm not going to be cut off at 5 minutes. So, okay, so the amendment of the rules is Article 9. So it says that the rules may be amended by an affirmative vote of the majority of the members of the commission present. The proposed amendment must be presented in writing at a regular or special meeting preceding the meeting at which the vote is taken. There was a special meeting of the Planning Commission on October 30th, and there are no minutes available for it yet, so you wouldn't really know.
That was a joint study session with the Bicycle Commission and the Sustainability Commission.
It's a person couldn't feel confident if they saw the bylaw revision proposal posted on that 48-hour notice meeting page, that nothing had already been presented in writing, because let's say somebody was just handing it out, or it was a change to the agenda that was allowed at the special meet. No, you have to stick to this. You have to stick to the agenda. A special meeting, I guess it wouldn't even allow for a special meeting is by definition something that sticks to the notice. So I don't think that somebody could have handed out the first week of the 2 weeks at the special meeting that you had. So there's no slip. I mean, no hoodwink, fast play could have been pulled off at October 30th. So this would
No,
be
ma'am.
the first week that something's being seen in writing, and the only thing that we're seeing in writing this week is this change to the part about the public comment or audience participation that is in Article 5, Order of Business, number 5. Then the next thing I would want to
Oh, well, we'll talk about that later. Go ahead.
say is that the advantage that people have who are either looking at the internet or have ideally they're looking at the internet, because then they know they're all looking at the same thing. If you're looking at the meeting page for tonight and you're looking at it on the internet, you're going to be able to see how it was before and see how it is with as modified, because the part that's added is underlined, like you have a lot of times when you're doing.
If you're concerned that we could simply adopt this tonight, I don't think we could by our own laws.
No.
I mean, by the own bylaws. It would have to be published, people would have to give it a notice, and we could
Yeah, I think
actually
we'll
adopt
clear,
it at a
that's my
later meeting.
interpretation, but we can clarify that in discussion exactly. It looks to me like we can't approve it tonight, and if we ask Jeff to make changes, we probably need to come back, submit those, and then probably even vote on it at a subsequent meeting, is what this provision sounds like it means to me.
So you're thinking because you've had the ideas about the other section, were you feeling that things would be taken one part at a time? Or would you be, whatever, you're going to give a whole list of different areas that Jeff might work up?
Yeah, my preference, and we'll discuss this further, would be to let city staff add all the changes in total, and then bring it back and let the public and the commissioners review it. And then if there's no further changes, then we could vote on it at a subsequent meeting. That would probably be the safest thing to do. But to let everybody see it all, rather than take it one piece at a time.
I don't think that it has the advantages that Roberts gives you, but I don't. The one thing I can say from that, two things from Roberts that pertain to this general area is this thing you read from the city lawyer. I don't think it doesn't go with this, that each society decides for itself the meaning of its bylaws. Like it would be entirely up to you. And unless there's a state law, there's state laws about stuff. And then the other, so in other words, you'd interpret your own bylaws and the city attorney wouldn't actually do that. And then you were saying, well, of course, as a chair, I can say, if you think I'm doing outrageous things, you can overrule me. I guess it does. Maybe it amounts to that, but is that what it would amount to if somebody had made a point of order to you? Then it would end up, if it ended up in appeal.
If I try to stop some testimony, my impression is if the commissioners feel strongly that they want to hear that testimony, they can override my ruling. Yes. Is that the question you're asking?
Okay. And you know what's wrong? I don't know if it's in any kind of a procedure, but I think that one thing that you get by somebody answer, it'd be good if it's clear when the petitioner is really responsible for their answer. It's that their their application hangs on that being the answer they meant to give, and so it's like not the other person sitting at the table who isn't the petitioner who's answering it. It's not I guess my point, you're saying it's up to the commission to place the questions. In other words, I can have a question and it really is my question, but if you decide to reformulate it or the petitioner answers what you think my question is, or I might ask a question and you might feel you're already aware of what the petitioner is going to say. You have that answer already, so you'll say, well, instead of, okay, let's say the staff memo about Henson and recycled asphalt shingle says somewhere that they're going to start in May, and it's not, or I asked the question because I want to know how soon could the recycled asphalt shingle start now that even without the Henson, because let's say Henson's held up because they're going to need to get the local site permitting because they're going to need to go by the existing Illinois EPA rules for construction and demolition recycling center. So I want to ask the question of the petitioner, but like in the minutes here of September 18th that were already approved. It says, Carol McCusick asked if the location of the entrance was, it's ambiguous here, it says within 400 feet of the property at 910 West Saline Court. It could be, it meant, is it inside of 910 West Saline Court, in the top 400 feet of 910 West Saline Court?
So your point is that you would prefer that, in the discussion we were having a minute ago, you would prefer the opponents to be able to ask questions directly to the petitioner and have the petitioner directly answer, rather than having them having the dialogue between all testimony come be with the Plan Commission. Is that what you think
Yeah,
your point of view?
The question that a person has may get fumbled by you all.
Yeah, that's, I've fumbled
Can I make a
sometimes,
quick
Mr. Trail.
point? I understand your concern, but I don't think we're in any more position to compel an answer than you if you get up during your public comment period and ask the question. The question's in the room. I don't think if we have the question, they're under any more, we can't legally compel testimony, I don't think.
We don't have any subpoena power or anything like that. I've never seen a petitioner not want to answer a question that somebody asked, actually.
Yeah.
They
So
usually jump up and try to rebut it as soon as they
in
can.
public, you're afforded the opportunity to convince, the commissioners to reiterate your question. In essence, there's nothing that prevents the petitioner from answering your question, the fact that we may not state the question, if we decide to reiterate it in the same way you do, you've got an opportunity to, during public comment to say we're idiots or whatever, but I don't think there's really that much you're making more of a case that there's a much bigger difference between our asking the question and you stating it in public comments than I think there may actually be.
There is a big difference. There is a big difference. Thank you for the opportunity to say so, because, if you, especially since you, they'll either if they have your question directly, they'll either answer the question somehow, or they will be on the record as
not having answered it, correct.
as nothing. But later, when you get another chance, you can say exactly how you felt they misunderstood your question or didn't quite answer it. It's gonna get to the nitty-gritty a lot better. It doesn't have to be hostile. I guess you're concerned it might be, but it seems.
Yeah, I agree with you. It doesn't have to be hostile, and yes, I am concerned that it could get that way. Yeah.
I think it's bad to avoid the reality that if there are some real issues. Bye. I think probably I said what I wanted to about the
Okay.
bylaws. Thank you for your.
Well, we appreciate your interest in the bylaws, and thank you for reminding us that we need to do this on an annual basis, and thank you for your testimony tonight.
Oh, if this is, one idea that I had was that you could have, but it's somewhat dependent upon maybe some kind of audio visual display of the text where you'd actually read through the whole thing, like you'd be able to see it when you were talking about the words you were crossing out and adding, and define an annual bylaw review period every year that's like the last few months that you have commissioners, like April through June. By the way, because this, this is being treated as a case today, but I do have some email from Jeff that said it wouldn't be a case. It's not a case. So that would be something that's not in the bylaws, whether it's a case or not, to have a bylaw to consider the bylaws. And on the legal page for the city attorney, it says he's there for either the members of the commission or for the staff to go to about board and commission functions. So if you have a discrepancy between you two guys, that would be a situation to ask him, is it a case or not a case to have for bylaws? Because, see, one thing about this is I have a communication of an entire system that I wanted to promote for an annual bylaw review period that would be marked off on the schedule of the regular schedule of annual meetings that you have under the Illinois Open Meetings Act, but it would be just let's say the rules for communication to the Plan Commission that is under these bylaws is I think weak, because I emailed this idea for the annual bylaw review period and the karaoke kind of display of the text of the bylaws to some canceled meetings in June. So those communications, they're not, because they weren't being treated as though they were for a case, they're not like held and collected by shepherded along by city staff the way the cases are.
Actually, I asked the city staff to gather those together and share them with us, and they were entered as communications, formal citizen communications at an earlier Plan Commission meeting.
I didn't like the way that it was, it was something like the emails, but not the attachments, and it wasn't clear that.
Well, if there's other things that you make sure that you send those to city staff. If there's anything that got left out, make sure you send those to city staff, and they will forward them to us, and we'll enter them into the record. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thank you again.
But what does it mean, enter them into the record?
Well, they're entered. They become part of the public record. They're entered as, as communications, and they become a part of the public record.
Well, the communications are not with the minutes. You look at approved minutes of a previous meeting. There's no communications.
Are those materials entered with the packet with the? Yeah, because that is an important thing.
Yeah, usually communications are kept with the case file if they're pertinent to a plan case, but if they're not pertinent to a case, they would be kept with our internal files for that particular meeting.
So it's like nothing you can see online is a part of the record of this meeting. And it also is not in the packet. I mean, it's not web posted. Like Jeff, it's come up. See, the person in the public never knows what the case is going to be to submit something, to have it go up with opposite the staff memo anyway. Anything that's coming from the petitioner, the staff memo is building that inside the staff memo. Even if I was able to see bylaws were coming up, which I wasn't, I've been waiting for this for most of a year. I wouldn't. Oh, if I had been able to see it, I don't see it before the web posting, so I don't know. I would never be able to submit to go out to be up on the web in advance. So there's the advance aspect of the communication, and there's also the matter of the record. It's not as though you even read through the communications to the meeting, you know, like it's not on TV or in the video recording. It's just like kind of a one-sentence report, and sometimes it's not accurate. Like you said, we have several emails. Well, that week, there was one email, and it had an attachment. But when Terry handed it out to the meeting, that was July 24th. Only the email was given out in paper, not the attachment. If you were not, if you were on the commission even, and you get your packet,
Can you make sure that we have all the communications that Ms. McCusick has submitted, please?
Yes, sir.
it needs a system that's fair and uniform and predictable for everybody in
I agree
advance.
with you. And we'll take your advice under consideration. Thank you. All right, so if we can get clarification, I don't know if there's anything further based on testimony or other thoughts that you've had that we want to try to tell Jeff tonight, or whether we want to let him work on some of the things we've talked about and take a look at it again at the next meeting, and then get a clarification on whether our interpretation is correct, that if we take, we're not going to be able, we can't vote tonight, that much is obvious. If you submit, and we'd ask you to make a few changes, so we can't vote on it at the next meeting either, because it's got to be presented in writing at the next meeting. So it's probably, at minimum, 2 meetings away that we can vote.
Well,
We could have a special meeting.
you could vote on what was submitted in writing, just what staff had already presented, but any changes we would have to present at the next meeting,
Correct.
and you
I'd
could,
rather just wait.
you
and-
could vote then.
Sure, but I think that was to Ms. Mukisik's point. Do we want to take it a section or point at a time? And I don't think so. I think we want to consider it in its whole. Mr. Hopkins?
I'm not quite clear what we're saying. It seems to me that if we get new language on 5, whatever that is,
Mhm.
5.5, that we should look at it at our next meeting or whenever the language is ready, and be prepared to vote on it at the meeting following it.
Yeah.
Because some of these other questions we've brought up, we're not going to get resolved in one meeting of discussion.
No, I agree with you. We can, but we will have to wait 1 meeting. So if we want
Yeah.
to say, okay, after we've, waited a meeting, and if we want to say, okay, we're going to approve these now, and we continue to review them, and then I agree that we need to do this every year. I mean, it's in our bylaws. So if city staff's going to research best practices or what other jurisdictions are doing, or the point of should all the boards have a common process, that's going to take time, no question about it.
I think we're more than 2 meetings away under any circumstances, because unless
Takes
we
as long
had
as it takes.
finalized language right now that we could tell them, here's the language we want presented at the next meeting, or,
It may well be, that may well be.
yeah, I just don't think this is something that's going to happen right away.
It'll take as long as it takes, and we need to get it right, so that's the key. And Jeff, thanks for the work you've done on it so far, and,
I have a do we want to add
Mr.
this
Fell.
sort of question.
okay,
The way our procedures are outlined here, if an opponent has a question I'll say question, they have to come up and ask it. They go sit down. We get the petitioner back up to ask him the question, then he goes and sits down. Can we insert some kind of language that is the chair's discretion to just ask the question right then? Because technically, we can't do that. So we don't have to
You
do,
typically don't want to have it.
we do
engage
that,
people in the
we
gallery.
do that, but
Yeah.
it doesn't really, like, if an opponent asks a question, we can just say, okay, Mr. Petitioner,
Mr.
can you
Po-
answer that?
Mr. Pollock would call people back, and I think I have that discretion, but it does require a back and forth.
Yeah, I
But
think,
actually, the procedures here say we should be doing what you're describing, but we don't do that.
Well, I mean, this sort of, to me, insinuates that the opponent has to ask a question, and when they're all done, they go sit down, and then we get the petitioner back up and ask.
What,
the
you're talking about
question, and-
6-6?
It says there should be
Yeah.
a relevant question, cross-examination of the petitioner.
It's like they could ask it directly.
Cross-examination,
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
lawyers,
Yeah.
the lawyers go at each other.
That's exactly what that implies.
Directly.
Yeah.
and I think for this kind of, setting, I think it's a lot easier. Yes, it may be, and plus we can suspend the rules if we decide it's there being an obstacle.
Yes.
So I suppose we could decide for this, there are so many people and so many questions, and we think they're really important. We're gonna allow you to, we're gonna keep the petition here, and we're gonna, them and a questioner at the same time. I mean, I suppose we would be allowed to do that, but I would think under normal circumstances, probably better to have, there's one person speaking, they've got the conch, and, limit it to that, but give people from the audience who do have specific questions, especially if time allows, a chance to come back up and say, you didn't answer my question, something.
Yes, I agree with you. Ms. Bynum?
I think it, would work better, kind of like what you're saying, to have them come up and then ask them one at a time, so that you're not having people yell from the back. I know for me personally, I wouldn't be able to hear them unless they're by the mic, so.
We want to discourage yelling from the back, yeah,
Yeah.
that's for sure.
We do have the
Mr. Chair.
option to have a permanent
Mike?
mic.
Town hall
and
style?
a public
Yeah.
mic, and do it that way. I mean,
Town hall style.
Yeah.
Kind of, yeah.
I mean, I realize it's.
With a
it's
moderator, then
It's a hearing. It's not really a town hall.
yeah.
But I mean, if we decided, unless they, say there's certain state rules we have to apply.
Yeah, I don't know.
Administrative law. But until we know that, I'd hesitate to spend too much time messing around with the mechanics of stuff.
I agree. Are there any further changes that specific changes that we want to ask for tonight prior to Mr. Engstrom working on it? No? Okay, then I'll continue this new business to the next Plan Commission meeting and move into audience participation. Do we have any further audience participation? Hello, Ms. Bukusic. Now I'm going to have to limit you to 5 minutes.
Okay, darn. In the September 18th minutes, I think that you said to me that people could find the Illinois EPA number on the internet, and the minutes say that I suggested that the city post it. I think that, I don't know if I did suggest that, but I do think it's a good I'm going to give it now. The Champaign Regional Office of the Illinois EPA is 278-5800. The reason would be that, when Henson, when recycled asphalt singles starts up, and if they're taking construction loads, it has a mixture of stuff because that's what the shingles mixed in with through the entrance. That's in the top 400 feet of 910 West Saline Court, if I have everything right about this. If it's mixed construction, demolition, waste, it should not be happening. It shouldn't be accumulating there. So that's that. And one thing about that case was very, I don't know if there's anything in the application for a special use permit which says you have to come back with a modification, but it was nice that they realized that they were not going to be following the site plan after all, and came back to city staff, because how would you really be tracking them to find that out in in your department of planning? I'm not sure that tracking would be happening. And
I'm pretty sure that would happen with the final approval prior to a building permit. So it was the final review prior to issuing a building permit, and city staff then looked and said, you're no longer substantially similar to the plan that we approved, so you have to come back again. So that's would be the trigger.
I see. Well, and then they got, with a modification, I guess they get another year to start building, to get that built, to do the building, maybe to start, maybe that's a good thing but there's a messed up part, I believe, of the, as far as a hearing process where you have two different applicants with two different applications answering questions together, nobody has any responsibility. I would say that is completely worthless. Whether the person asking is the commission or an opponent or whatever. But here's this about, this is about when I was under the part, I was asking questions about will part of the loads be construction waste, it doesn't say who said this, but it says Southwind RAS, that's the recycled asphalt shingle, will be going forward with their development because they have all of their permits in place. Will they be only accepting shingles? Mr. Engstrom stated that Southwind RAS does have all of their permits from the EPA. Those permits are based on the site plan. However, he did not feel that the changes to the site plan were important to the permits. So this is one of these questions with which, now I'm talking. That's end of quote. This is on page 4 of September 18th minutes. So this is one of these questions where you're referring to the site plan as I guess the earlier site plan in December of 2013 in the sentence. I thought that they were back again because there was a new site plan.
I think what Mr. Engstrom said is that the changes to the site plan weren't significant enough to impact their permits from the Illinois EPA, but they were significant enough for us to reconsider the special use permit. In other words, it had to do with the traffic coming in and out of there, which the EPA wasn't really concerned about. The EPA was concerned about their actual facility and their processing plant. I think that the moving the driveway was the thing. I think maybe Jeff can provide a little more.
Yes, I don't believe the EPA looks at the site plans at the same level Plan Commission does. So yeah, the location of the driveway and the location of the processing is not as important to them as it is to us.
Well, aren't they looking very, that's upsetting.
Well, I'm actually not sure what the Illinois EPA looks at. I'm telling you what triggered us to review it.
I guess one other question is, like, this, if it's like broadly engineered, like there's underground water from the entire, both lots that goes to the detention pond that's in a nearby property. I wonder if, like, I wonder if that detention pond is like, and everything on the way, you know, all the of course, the stormwater to it is really lined, so you don't have,
That'd be a question for the city engineer. And I assume since they approved it, that it meets their criteria. All right, well, thank you again for your testimony. All right, do we have a staff report?
Just a couple quick updates. The Central Illinois Mosque and Islamic Center that the Plan Commission, let's see, actually you guys issued final approval, so that did not go to City Council. Never mind. At the special joint meeting last week, that case was presented at Committee of the Whole on Monday, and the committee forwarded it to City Council for action on November 17th. And that's all I have.
Great, thank you. We do not have a study session, so we're adjourned.